It's just me. No. Oh, wait, it's you. It's doing speaker view. We're good.
Great. You're seeing it on Instagram or wherever we are.
It's on Facebook and YouTube right now. And then Instagram, I'm going to set it to go live.
Yep. And you can also just check if you want to ping a team member to go look like Kennedy, then they can go check from the other end. Awesome. Well, if anyone's already quick to the draw, we're just waiting for folks to get here and we'll get started really soon. So super excited.
I'm actually just pumped that this worked.
Gotta love when technology actually works. It's like extra special.
Oh, yeah. It is live on Facebook and we are live
Nice.
on YouTube.
Fabulous. Love that. Love that so much.
And then I'll send to Instagram in like a couple minutes.
Yep.
Don't want to, I feel like Instagram's where it would maybe be the weirdest for us to just be awkwardly live.
Yes. Well, if anyone's already tuning in, welcome, welcome. Super happy you're here.
It's got a delay too. Wow.
Oh, that's very normal. That's very normal. I'm excited for this though. I'll tell Todd when he gets here, but I've been aware of their work for several years and um, you know, got to know Eric Bronner, one of the co-founders of the organization a few years ago and met up with him in person and all that. So it's exciting because I haven't yet to meet Todd, so this will be great.
Todd's great. I met him at Nanner. We talked briefly, so
Yeah, that's great.
excited for this. And yeah, I'm excited to see if we like can get views from the, external streaming. It's cool and allows us to spread our like these kind of things further.
Make sure to turn on record too on the Zoom so we get the Zoom recording.
YouTube automatically records it.
Fabulous.
So it'll like report as a live and then we can save it.
Okay, great.
And then I'll keep an eye out for chat stuff the whole time. And if there's any questions, and then I'll ping in Discord that we're going live and have the Zoom link and then make sure I admit anybody that wants to come in.
Love it. Love it, love it.
Yeah, this was probably the most stressed I've been about setting up technology because it was very stressful. So I'm happy it's working.
It's working, Quinn. It's working. I understand that. I've live streamed many a conference, and that is very stressful when you literally have like from the stage and you're hoping and praying that it's going through out to everyone who's coming in virtually. That's especially like when it's like someone's whole Saturday. Oh my gosh, super stressful. But that was in a past job, so little less stressful here, thankfully. Well, if anyone's tuning in, hi, I'm Victoria. I'm Good Party's Chief Operating Officer. We're going to get ready in just a few minutes when we have Todd from Veterans for All Voters here. So just sit tight. And if you have questions that come up throughout the conversation, you can drop those in the chat wherever you are on whichever platform, and we will do our best to relay them back to Todd so you can get answers to whatever you're thinking.
I have three different videos of you going at the same time, all on different like timeouts. So I just heard that three times. But as well, so we're good.
That's great. You're gonna You're gonna have like a weird echo brain after. You're gonna be like, whoa.
All right. And Todd should be joining here in a minute.
Fabulous. Love it. I'm excited too. Gives me a chance to use my new little mic setup that I got going here for these types of things.
Podcasting.
Yeah, just been doing more guesting and stuff like that too. So
Cool.
it's, yeah, it's fun.
Once we get Todd in here, I'll go ahead and start the Instagram stream.
Fabulous.
For the YouTube, I guess we'll just have to edit out.
Well, that's
And
why I'm
then,
wondering if you should record it here, like when it starts. That way you get a clean recording.
yep, I can do that too.
Yeah. Without the initial tech checks.
I was just nervous that it was going to be broken. Like it worked a way smoother than I expected it to. So I was like nervous that it was not
Yeah.
that. Like I was like, this is going to be chaos.
Not chaos today. No chaos today. I've had other forms of chaos today, but not, this is all good. If anyone's joined us in the last 2 minutes since I said this, hello. It's good that you're here. I'm Victoria. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Good Party, and we're almost ready to start here. We'll be with Todd Connors of Veterans for All Voters. So really looking forward to getting all of our questions answered. A whole bunch of people submitted questions for him. And if you have questions that pop up, you can put them in the chat of whichever platform you're watching this from so we can get some answers for you. So very excited. And Quinn, you're checking that the waiting room, he's not like in the waiting room or anything.
Yep.
Great.
And yeah, so there, I did check that the waiting room actually works too, and it does.
Great. Love that.
Cool. Yeah. Pinged Discord.
All right.
All right. You guys should be able to just go right away, and I'll go ahead and go live on Instagram for this once he
Oh, I
pops.
see Todd now.
Yep.
Great.
Hey guys,
Hi, Todd.
how are you, Victoria?
Hi, it's good to actually formally meet you. I've heard so many things from so many people. So,
Yeah, great to formally meet you as well.
yeah, super
You're
excited to
here.
chat today and
Yeah, me
glad
too. I'm gonna move this
glad to,
laundry. Hold on.
all good. This is the fun of working from home, right?
Gosh, it's like the one. It's the perk.
Yep, it's life.
Actually, it's clean laundry. So
There you go. No, I did literally 10 loads of laundry on Saturday. I nearly lost my mind, but I got it done. It was too much.
totally.
Awesome. Well, we're already going live, and then we're just waiting for some folks to jump in on the Zoom, but we're already out on all the platforms, so we'll be able to get going shortly, but we'll just wait another minute or two until
Sure.
we actually start. But how are you? How's it going?
It's great. Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm here in Chicago right now. We've got folks around the country. An event tonight in DC. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of the national network is activated around a variety of places and opportunities. So yeah, it's great.
Love that. I'm in Chicago too, right? Like I'm in Lakeview, so I'm like
Oh,
I know you're in Indiana, right? Normally that's where you're based.
yeah, we
Mhm.
split time between Hyde Park and then
Mhm.
Indiana. So we actually have an apartment here in Hyde Park, which is where
Oh,
I am
nice.
now, and then we have a house in Indiana. Um,
Fabulous.
yeah, and kind
That's
of
great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll grab coffee sometime then. We'll find whenever
I'd
you're up
love to.
next. That's
Yeah.
great.
We were in Lakeview forever. I mean, we lived,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
That's rad. Yeah, I
Lot.
moved here a year and a half ago, so I'm still like a newish Chicagoan, but I'm loving it.
Oh,
It's totally the right place for me, so I'm happy about it.
congrats and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's great.
Awesome. We have a couple people who've joined us. Hi guys, welcome. Glad you're here. We're gonna get started in just a minute or two here. We're got a lot of great questions queued up for Todd, and we're out on the platforms right now on Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter. So, or X. I have to get used to saying X. I'm still not there yet. My brain can't do it.
Yeah. It's gonna take a
So,
while.
Quick thing I will say is Todd for the Instagram, if you could stay in like the middle of your screen, right there is perfect. You're perfect right there. It like crops it weird, so it was like the center and we were getting like half of your head.
get the vertical shot. There we go.
Yep. But yeah, go ahead
Fabulous.
and start whenever.
Yeah, let's get started. So, welcome everybody. Super happy you're here for this conversation with Todd Connor, of Veterans for All Voters. We'll get him to introduce himself in just a moment. I'm Victoria Mitchell. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Good Party. We're here to take on the two-party system in politics. That's our prerogative. And so, super excited that you're here joining us, wherever you come from, wherever you're interested in this movement from. It's really important that we're doing this work across this amazing democracy reform movement and network that exists. You may know us and our organization, but we're not alone. There's so many incredible partner organizations out there doing the good work, whether it's working on, different ballot initiatives and reform work, or like Todd's organization that's really focusing on a particular group of people and how we can activate them toward what we're trying to do here in our democracy to make it much better than it is today. And, I know many of us are probably feeling a little bit of like, if you do follow politics, the hangover from Super Tuesday and all the intensity of that. And so we hope that this is a refreshing kind of conversation, about how we can innovate and change politics and the really awesome work that Todd's organization is doing. And so we already collected a bunch of really great questions. From folks. So we've got some questions that we'll go through. If you have questions as Todd's sharing, doing his introduction, other questions, please put those in whatever chat you're on, whether you're here with us in the Zoom or you're watching this on any of the social channels. Please put your questions in the chat, and we will do our best to fold those in and get some answers from Todd, since that's the name of the game of the AMA today. So super excited, Todd, and really, really excited that you're here. So I think just to kick things off, would love if you could just introduce yourself to everybody and who you are and a little bit about the organization would be fantastic.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Victoria. And thanks to everyone that's joining and tuning in. It's great to be connected. So as Victoria mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders along with Eric Bronner of Veterans for All Voters. And we launched this effort 2.5 years ago, just about to really build a platform for the disaffected, disenfranchised, frustrated, sensical veteran majority that we think is looking for a place to show up. They understand that our country is facing a political crisis. They understand that it's a partisan crisis in nature, and they're looking for solutions beyond sort of jumping into the sort of typical partisan fray, or jumping into the sort of the frame debate of Trump versus Biden. I think myself and I think this is the impetus for others that are joining us, are looking at like, what are the structural things going on that have led us to this current state of affairs that we're seeing play out in our national politics and increasingly in our local politics, and how do we really get the American political system back on the rails? So that was the impetus for us starting this. I come at this work having done other things. I started an organization called Bunker Labs, which helps military veterans start businesses. And I spent 10 years, about a decade, just really focused on entrepreneurship, which is my background. And having prior to that served in the Navy and gone to business school. And so my passion is really entrepreneurship and working with the military community. And the split screen for me was in the work I was doing prior to this current sort of work was really inspiring. I was traveling around the country, visiting chapters of Bunker Labs where I would go and visit, pitch competitions in Bozeman, Montana, and Miami and New York and Raleigh, Durham, and Chicago and Des Moines and everywhere in between. And routinely, I was confronted with the most inspiring sort of stories of military veterans who'd served their country, had come home and were building businesses. And always in that work, irrespective of people's politics, we came together as a community to build things. And so seeing a can-do patriotic community and being inspired on a daily basis was in such stark contrast to then watching our national politics play out and being told that we're a country divided, seeing horrible behavior that was tolerated or incentivized. And I just really felt like if you're paying attention in this moment in our country, you have to have a thesis about what's wrong, and more importantly, how to fix it. And so that led me to reading and thinking and talking to other smart people, and where I landed is really around election reform, and that the system that is constructed is a duopoly. And I've been a participant, I've been a consumer of this duopoly. I've run for office, I have been to presidential conventions, I had an early history as a Republican, I had a later current history as a Democrat. But the two-party system is constructed in such a way that it doesn't really allow for innovation. It gives us like notably bad outcomes. This is, overwhelmingly Americans don't want the rematch that we're facing at the federal level, the presidential level. And so you have to ask yourself, how do we get here? How are we operating in a system in which people don't want what they're seeing, and yet it continues to feed us more of the same? And I was really inspired by a book by Michael Porter and Catherine Gale called The Politics Industry. Michael Porter is a Harvard Business School strategy professor. Anyone who's been to business school has probably read Michael Porter or knows Porter's Five Forces. It's sort of the prevailing competitive strategy model. It's about how to understand pricing and monopolies and duopolies and how to create competition in marketplaces. But he and Catherine Gale, and Catherine's an entrepreneur and kind of political innovator from Wisconsin, who's also a business school professor. And I also teach at the University of Chicago Business School. So it's like these business school thinking is sort of a systems mindset and say, well, what's going on from a systems standpoint? And Michael Porter and Catherine Gale's book really cut through, because it was like the system view of the political system is a duopoly. It's unregulated, because in any regulated marketplace, we don't allow duopolies to exist, because the reason duopolies and monopolies are illegal is because they can charge whatever they want and kind of rob voters or consumers of choices, and you don't have anywhere else to go. And so that's why we actually regulate duopolies where they're allowed to exist. The political economy is an unregulated marketplace. The political parties are unregulated, and so this duopoly is allowed to continue. That's fine. We all kind of know that. We all kind of know it's sort of a problem. It lacks innovation. The prevailing question for me was, how do you get beyond that? How do you get to? And I'm not trying to get rid of the good party maybe is. I'm not trying to get rid of the two parties. I do want there to be healthy multi-party democracy, or I at least want the parties to function in a way that they're supposed to. What they're supposed to do is meet the needs of the voters and present them candidates. Parties at their best are bringing forward and elevating great candidates to serve the public interest. I would argue the parties are totally failing in their function and ability to do that today. So election reform is how you get, from a structural standpoint, beyond what we're looking at today. And the reforms that we really support as an organization are ranked choice voting and open primaries. And the combination of those two things, which Alaska is currently doing, which we call Final Four voting or Final Five voting. And we can get into the mechanics, but the impetus is, if you get rid of partisan primaries and replace them instead with a unified all-candidate primary, all-voter primary, a couple of things happen. Number one, registered independents are allowed to vote. 51% of military veterans are registered independents. They're unaffiliated with the two major parties. And it's the fastest growing voter bloc in this country, especially with young people. And so you allow, for the first time, independents to participate in the primaries. And then you also, by having 4 or 5 options in the general, you move beyond this kind of binary decision construct. It's usually Republican versus Democrat, but whenever there's only 2 people in the race, you don't have to build up your arguments for yourself. I just need to destroy, the other thing, and that's my path to victory. That's the cheapest way to get there. Actually, that's like the persuasion path. which is why Coke and Pepsi, when we only had two brands in the 90s, they led with negative advertising because the assumption was the American people are going to drink cola. The only question is it going to be Pepsi or is it going to be Coke? So the way to win that is to go negative, which sounds ridiculous, like that, Coca-Cola would, lead with negative campaigning on Pepsi and vice versa. And yet it was the prevailing strategy in the 90s, which was great up until when you had more options in flavored water and other things. It immediately became a really dumb strategy. And so if we implement the Alaska election model in more states, what it does is it disincentivizes negative campaigning. It allows registered independents to vote. It forces the candidates that are running to appeal to the majority of their constituents, not just in their partisan primary, and all kinds of positive, constructive things begin to happen as a result. So we're focused on this because it's not a pipe dream. It doesn't require a constitutional amendment. We can go state by state, and if every state has the authority to determine how they conduct their federal elections, every state does their elections differently, which people don't even realize, that the way that California elects senators is different from Nevada, is different from Texas, is different from Illinois. So if you go state by state, you can change the way that people conduct their federal elections. You can begin to get reasonable people back into federal office who are incentivized to work across the aisle, not as an act of sacrifice, but because it actually helps your reelection, not because it threatens it. For most senators, it absolutely threatens their reelection to work across the aisle. And you can begin to fix this thing. So that's what we're doing. We're building a movement. We're mobilizing veterans. We've got campaigns in about 12 different states that are working towards what I just described to you. And we think we're going to have a lot of wins actually in 2024 and 2026 and begin to make real progress on stabilizing the political environment and, importantly, creating space for multi-party democracy, which can include the good party and others.
Thank you so much for that overview and sharing more about what is, Final Four and Final Five, because I feel like that's starting to hopefully raise the profile of those terms that many people have heard of ranked choice voting at this point. That one's out there, but I think the combination, right, is really where your work is focused, and then that's great. And you're definitely preaching to the choir of folks who are in our world, right? Who are independent, affiliated with alternative parties, who are, see themselves as nonpartisan even. Like I don't want to do any of that. And I just want to see this work. So I think, it's really, really essential what you all are doing. And, just to kind of dive into some of the questions that we got, leading up, and if folks have just tuned in, if you have questions for Todd throughout, just drop it in the chat, whichever platform you are watching us from, and we will fold those questions in as we go. But to kick it off, Todd, we had actually two similar questions. One from username in our Discord, Local Lizard Lady, and then also from Rob on our team. I'll give you both in case they inspire slightly different answers. But Local Lizard Lady, she said, hi Todd, thanks for answering questions. How can the skills and values you bring with you from your time from the military be applied to advocating for a more effective and less toxic political system in the United States? And then Rob asked, how can we effectively draw upon the lessons learned from veterans about fostering collaboration, promoting bipartisanship, setting differences aside to achieve common goals to make our politics less toxic and our government more effective? So curious how you draw on your experience and obviously talking to veterans all day, and your past experience in the military.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for putting it out there. The biggest thing is, well, the question we get a lot is like, why veterans? Because what we're talking about is election reform. It's not veteran specific. I'd say a couple of things. One is there are specific election law implications that hurt veterans or affect veterans disproportionately to other populations. So if you think about, UOCAVA voters or people that are voting overseas, changing election laws can have a disproportionate impact on them. If you think about the fact that the majority of our community is registered independent, not being able to vote in partisan primaries is a huge problem. And you don't have to not be, you can be a proud Democrat or a proud MAGA Republican and still see the injustice of registered independents who are military veterans being unable to participate in the elections that are going to determine the winners and in turn the representatives of your state. That is a huge, huge moral failure of our country. And so there are 6 southern states that have used ranked choice voting, but only for military overseas ballots. So there's a lot of sort of nuance that affects the military community in a unique way, and we talk about that. I think the biggest thing for us is as a community is that Americans are so um, skeptical of politicians, of public authorities, of a lot of people. They feel very let down, and the question is, who do they still trust, and who's going to lead us in this movement? Because even as political scientists have technical solutions, which are powerful and impactful, we have to figure out how to create a mass movement around technical reforms that can actually unlock our democracy. And that's where we really see our contribution as the military community, where we're appealing to, folks that are not famous, they're not politicians, but they're people that were serving in the military. They've worn the cloth of the nation. They're back home in Oklahoma and Missouri, and they're running small businesses, or they're living their lives. But they're also standing up and saying there has to be a better way, and there actually is a better way, and let's talk about how to do that. So we really view our contribution to the movement, this broader movement of political reform, because the alternative is status quo, and the status quo is failing us. So I'm creating a big bucket around reform because it's like beyond the status quo. Our contribution to that is to be messengers of the movement that can elevate people's consciousness around what responsible citizenship is, what some of the solutions are, and talk to people in a way that kind of moves beyond the binary and partisan frame that the Republican and Democratic Party have kind of constructed. So we really think that that's an important contribution that we can make. And veterans are spread across the country. Only 1% of young people join the military. And when they get out of the military, they return home often to the communities that they're from. So it's an interesting community that if you organize it well, and we've seen this with the American Legion or the VFW, if you build a strong national brand but activate it locally, you can quickly build a national movement. And in the 2 years that since we've been around, we have, I mean, as of this morning, because we were looking at the numbers, we have 330 volunteers representing 48 states. So in the short 2 years that we've, put the organization together and announced that we're here to talk about election reform and alternative systems of governance, we've been able to recruit folks in almost every state in this country. And we think that that can have, kind of an outsized impact. So we think those are some of the roles for Americans or veterans who still have a desire to serve this country, are very concerned, and they want a constructive way to engage. They don't want to be partisan. They don't want to be sniping. They don't want to be on X, but they want to be making a contribution, and we're trying to build a platform for them to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. The geographic diversity there is fantastic. Like really, really, really cool. And, just curious if you can add a little bit more to part of the question too, around like what values and skills from the military experience, kind of translate into this work today, especially for those of us who aren't veterans, what would you kind of share about how that, translates into this work?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it for us is, and we have organizational values that are very strong. I mean, one of them is we operate above the partisan fray. There's a professionalism when you're in the military, that like some of the behavior that we see play out. I'm like, you'd be fired or court-martialed for standing up and acting that way. So like this very basic test of professionalism, which is like you are respectful, you don't use profanity in public, um, you don't try to operate as like a takedown artist. I think those things that resonate with us, that we choose to operate above the fray. We also choose to center friendship. We're building a community. I mean, that's really core and central. And one of our values is that we're going to be friends when this work is done. And we're trying to take the long view of both our relationships with each other, as well as the history of this country, view this country in sort of seasons. And I'm trying to understand the season that we're in, but yeah, staying optimistic about our ability to move past it. And then I think a really important value is like getting things done. I am like uninterested in academic debates that have no insight around. I mean, there's a lot of kind of alternative proposals of different voting methods, and a lot of people are very concerned about the country. But I want to get wins on the board. I mean, if we're sitting here in 4 years and the states haven't changed their election laws, like we have not done our jobs. And so I really like we try to really anchor on intellectual honesty about what is going to have an impact and what's your theory of the case. Is it a disruption play? Is it a incentive, kind of reform that you're trying to change? My greatest fear in some ways of this moment, of this movement, is that a lot of well-intended people are going to step into the conversation with money and focus on, frankly, the wrong thing. And it won't be a bad thing, but let me just give you an example. Like voter registration, saying, hey, the problem is that young people aren't voting, blames young people. It's like, we're going to, instead of thinking about the choices we've given young people, we're just going to blame young people for not voting. Like, it's so backwards. It's so shameful. And frankly, like, young people show up in droves and vote, and they do when they think their vote matters, and when they have choices they can rally behind. So if the system has not given them that, it's not their fault. We have to look at the system. So I'm very much anchored in systems thinking. Veterans are as well. We want to get real things done. We're uninterested in just going to conferences for the sake of conferences or having conversations for the sake of conversations. I mean, we're happy to do some of that stuff because it's important to stay in coalition. But like at the end of the day, we want to be getting things done, because we're not walking away from other, professions and opportunities to just try to kind of give us some kind of glorified, good citizen badge. It's like, the audience that we're working with has already earned that. They don't need more of that. What they want to do is solve real problems. And so I think we're very grounded in needing to solve real problems and get it done quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we have a similar thing we say with Good Party as well around that. It's like, it's not that young people don't care and they're not patriotic or don't care about this country, so they're not voting. Like, that's not why, and that narrative is really toxic. It's just driving people further from civic participation instead of bringing them in closer. And when you actually examine and go like, well, what options are you giving them? And especially if you're younger and you've grown up in this age of really toxic on the internet all the time politics, it's tough to imagine a different version. And that's what the work you're doing is trying to do. The work we're trying to do is just say, let's build the alternative and let's go be the doers and the builders who do that, instead of just talking about it and hoping or blaming young people for why we're in this state. Like it doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
yeah. I think
And it
okay.
can be a real season. I think this is Good Party and other efforts that are underway. I mean, I think it can be a real season of innovation.
Yes.
And things can break through. And we've seen toxic things break through and upend the system. Well, there's no reason why positive things can't also break through and upend the system. And I think we're operating in that spirit of like, it can be a season of disruption. And the last time we built a new political party was when Abraham Lincoln ran as a minor party candidate and cobbled together disaffected voters and a kind of a cobbled together what were then sort of random minor identity parties into what then became the Republican Party. And it's laughable to me that the Republican and Democratic Party sort of don't understand the history of how political parties have even been formed in the past. George Washington never joined a political party. It was his greatest fear. The only third party, minor party president we've ever had was Abraham Lincoln. And it was in the context of a deeply divisive moment in this country. And so, Republicans, I don't think, understand the history of what the Republican Party even was, or maybe what it is, but certainly not what it was, or what the sort of the grounding value of Abraham Lincoln's moment was. And so I think we have to hope for a season of innovation. And I'm a big believer that the right ideas at the right time have a power and a force that money and institutional staying power cannot overcome. And I think we're just at a moment where we need more political entrepreneurs at the forefront, which is why I'm grateful for Good Party and other things. Not because I know exactly how it's going to land, but because I think, if you're a betting person, if you're a venture capitalist, you look at the fact that there's a market that Americans loathe, they universally are disgusted by it. And even their own team and even the folks that are supposedly fighting for them, they're also frustrated with them. So if you're a betting person, you say, start investing in alternatives. I don't know how it's going to land, but I know it's the future because the current state isn't sustainable. And I think we need to sort of be in that season, in that space.
Very well said. Absolutely. We had a question from David, who is a veteran. It's a little bit of a long one, so let me kind of walk through it. But he says, many veterans who deeply value the team-centric approach fostered within the military find the transition to civilian life challenging, especially when entering the workplace. And the negative aspects of workplace competition, in quotes, specifically relates to the potential for tension, between veterans who are accustomed to team centric versus competition, and civilians who may be more focused on individual achievements and not that team centric approach, and that can lead to misunderstandings and challenges. So given the challenges of integrating veterans and non-veterans in the workplace, he says, I can only imagine the unique challenges integrating a veteran into a political campaign team where too many cooks in the kitchen can, pose challenges, and it just seems like a totally different beast. So as a veteran, he says, I'm particularly interested in how your organization addresses the challenge of melding distinct perspectives, to ensure kind of some harmonious collaboration. And can you share any specific strategies, practices, that have been effective in reconciling differences and enabling veterans and non-veterans to work cohesively toward our shared political goals? So really
Yeah.
thoughtful question.
Thank you, David. And first of all, I would say to any veteran on this call, please join us. veteransforallvoters.org/volunteer. What we're most eager for is for you to join your state page so we can list you and have your headshot and say, and just, it's like literally as simple as saying, I'm a veteran, I believe in these reforms. And it's amazing how we get to cut through the noise and go straight to politicians. And when we go lobby, people really listen to us. I mean, they really are tuned into like the people that have done the hardest things in service to this country having an opinion about how broken our political system is. And so please do join us. To your question, I mean, one of the things I would comment on is, and everyone's got a different experience, and I was in the Navy and I got out in 2004, it's a long time ago, but I think veterans, so much of what they're missing is that sense of purpose. And there's so much more like infrastructure for veterans to stay engaged after World War II and come back and join kind of the legacy organizations like the American Legion and VFW. We don't sort of have that same stuff in this generation, but I think what veterans are longing for is community and purpose. And we are literally trying to build kind of a next generation veteran service organization to solve the biggest challenge our country's facing right now, and to do it in the spirit of community. And it's also really hard to get people to walk away from a thing if they've been partisan in a very kind of contrived way, unless you give them a new home, right? And so we're trying to actively create a new home. And we're not asking people to leave their political party, but give them another space to show up and engage in like smart conversation, and do it in the spirit of camaraderie, and give veterans a new purpose, a purpose focused on the mission that our country is in dire need of right now. And so I think that is a lot of the transition challenge is just you get used to having a sense of a team around you and a mission that you're working towards. And when you got out of the military, like that all kind of goes in the background. And I think it's not, I say all the time, it's not enough that we give veterans jobs and healthcare. That is sort of like the floor of what we need to support transitioning military with. The aspiration has to be a purpose, and not just for them. And this is important, but not just because veterans deserve that, but because like we need that. Like this is, our society is in desperate need of leadership, and what we see play out in a political context is not leadership. It's embarrassing. We don't want our children to see it. It's shameful. And again, I kind of want to raise the bar, because most of us is sort of forced to sort of fall into one of two teams, but challenge the team that you've been on to say, if all of your fundraising email is just driven by hatred of the other person and telling me that this is the most important election of our lives, when's the last time you had a competitive election? Challenge our own folks on, are you invested in giving voters more options, or is it just are you just sort of part of the problem because you're just protecting your own game? So I think we have to ask deeper questions about what it means to be pro-democracy. We have to ask deeper questions about what it means to be patriotic, what the point of elected, service is. And we need veterans to sort of be engaged in that work. And I think that's how we can help heal this country, but also give in the process a bunch of veterans purpose.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing just as a practical thing, which is tying something you said earlier of if you are registered independent, like you said, I think it was 51% of veterans are, and you're in a place that has closed primaries where you're literally not able to vote. It's making sure the current elected officials who will have a role to play in the reforms that Todd's organization is pushing. Sometimes we're trying to do ballot initiatives to literally push past the people in power because they don't want the rules to change on them. And sometimes they can get on board and actually be really important advocates to make these changes to the way that we vote. So just calling them out and saying, hey, I'm someone who literally can't vote in the state, and I serve this country, and that's not okay. So I think if you are independent and and feel that way, that's putting the pressure on, I think it's very stark to say that. I mean, it's painful, right? And then they should feel that pain, because it's not okay.
It's not okay, and it's shocking to Americans.
Yep.
It is shocking to Americans that a registered independent in a place like Nevada cannot vote in the primary. And the primary is where where the winners get determined. Overwhelmingly, 87% of Republicans, 86% of Democrats want to reduce the role of money in politics, but neither party takes it on. So there's vast agreement, even within and across the political spectrum amongst Americans, of a change agenda that they're eager to see enacted, but the political establishment is uninterested. Same thing for election reform. I mean, in many of the states, go back to Nevada, where we're advocating for increased competition. It's like trying to open up the primaries and have force a majority winner rule for the general election and give voters more than two choices. It's the only thing that the two political parties agree that they're against. So it's really it's frustrating. And as someone who's tried to kind of play within the construct of the Democratic Party and in the past of the Republican Party, I've come to the belief that, and history tells us this, the political parties are not going to move us out of this moment. They can't. So it's going to be a citizen movement. History tells us that. And fortunately, we have citizens on our side. So we have to break through. We have to remind people about how reforms can happen and what that process looks like. But every 70 years or so, we go through this cyclical need to reinvent ourselves, strip away the power structure, give the power back to people, renormalize the environment. And really, in this moment, it's the great kind of exhausted middle majority that has been summarily excluded from our political discourse. And that's who we're trying to return power to. But yeah, back to the point, Americans are shocked to find out that registered independents and military veterans can't vote in certain elections. They're also shocked to find out that you don't have to get a majority of votes to win most elections in this country. I mean, people are winning with small pluralities. I mean, I told, look at Iowa, for example. Around Trump winning the election, I just remind people from a numerical standpoint, Trump got 50,000 votes in Iowa. There are 780,000 registered Republicans. And then there are 3.8 million people. So the media headline of like an overwhelming victory in Iowa is in the context of such very small numbers, 50,000 voters in the context of 3.8 million residents. So we fundamentally don't have a political system that is involving the majority of Americans and then expressing their desires in the form of the people that end up getting elected. It's just a perversion that needs to be corrected. And I think election reform can do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think this actually leads into a perfect segue for this question. Username was FV Cesari, and they ask, one area I'm particularly interested in is how do you approach and engage with individuals or groups who may be skeptical about the potential for election innovations to truly make a difference in making politics less toxic and government more effective? And be curious your take in general, and then also, in your role of representing and working with veterans to make these changes, how you approach those skeptical people who are like, no, it's never gonna happen, or like, I don't know, those kind of folks, or people who are downright like opposed to it and don't see the point.
Yeah. It's interesting because ranked choice voting has become stigmatized, and the Republican National Party has put it on their platform. It's one of only 4 things. Former President Trump is vehemently opposed because his preferred candidates have a harder time winning in majority winner election systems. They tend to win in closed primary systems where the most partisan people are voting, and independents and others are excluded. So, and the same is, by the way, true on the Democratic side. I mean, the math holds true with the most progressive folks stand to potentially lose if you don't represent the majority interest of your voters. So what we're talking about, we have to go back to the principles. So the question of how do you talk to people that are skeptical? First, I say we believe in a few principles. Let's center this on the voter. Do you think that a registered independent should be able to vote in taxpayer-funded elections? Yes. Okay, then that's open primaries. Do you think that politicians should have to get a majority of votes in order to win? Yes. Do you think that voters should have choices when they go vote? Yes. Well, if you believe that voters should have choices, politicians should have to campaign to get the majority of the votes, and that registered independents should participate, then you support final five voting. I mean, you may not understand the mechanics of it. And if you're vehemently opposed to ranked choice voting or any other reform that you've heard about, why are you pro status quo? And I think bringing people back to that to say, well, then you're pro status quo. And trying to raise the consciousness for people to say, well, I don't like the status quo, but I don't like the reforms. Well, then what's your proposal? And this is, again, where the military community, it's like, I'm uninterested in debates to nowhere. I need you to come with ideas. And I'm open. I'm very open to people that have other solutions. Some people want to talk about term limits and money in politics and other things. I'm open for all of it. I don't come at this with an ideological bent. I'm not a member of any cult. I'm just interested in ideas that might be effective. And if you have good ideas that can be effective, then let's explore it. And it's important. We have a whole messaging guide where, if you're trying to explain technical reforms, I think you're losing. The more important thing is to center people back on the problem statement. Do you think the current two-party system is working? No. Why don't you think it's working? Because it gives us choices that we don't want. Okay. Do you think independents should be able to vote? Most people think yes, So these are universal values. People are frustrated with the two-party system. They're frustrated with their own party, almost more frustrated in some polls with their own party than they are with the two-party system, which is where you see some kind of MAGA folks being more mad at what they would call rhinos than even the Democrats. It's like this intra-party nastiness that has nothing to do with policy. It has nothing to do with ensuring majority winners. It just has to do with personality fights. It doesn't serve the American interest, and it has a direct impact on the military today. I mean, our inability, the grandstanding by Tommy Tuberville and some of the nonsense going on there, it's affecting national security. It's affecting military recruitment. It's a real problem, and again, the ground conditions. When we talk about these reforms, there's particular opposition from the MAGA right. But again, this is like what we're talking about is technical changes that will hurt supermajority Democratic states because it will introduce more choices, and it will hurt extreme, and supermajority Republican states. It's going to hurt both sides equally, just depending on where it gets applied. What it will help is politicians that want to appeal to the middle majority of their constituents and serve the interests of their state, not just be a predictable vote for the party leadership in the Senate or in the House. And that's all we have today. I tell most people, your United States Senator is Mitch McConnell, or your United States Senator is Chuck Schumer, because very few votes does your senator ever do anything other than what they've told them to do. And so that's not representation. And I think intellectually, even if you like your senator, I like mine, it doesn't make sense, right? So we just have to move beyond like this idea that you can't have intellectual honesty and question what your party's doing, that somehow makes you disloyal. No, don't treat us as stupid. We can ask obvious questions. We should talk about solutions that can work, and then we should hold our own parties accountable to make sure that those solutions get implemented.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, and I think along, the lines of skepticism, I want to give you a question that I think just is trying to probe on something on the website and around money and politics. So I'll from Daytake, he says, "Hi, Todd. On the website for Veterans for All Voters, it says all politicians have to work much harder to stay in office under an open primary system." And he goes on, one of the biggest contentions in our current system for electing people to office is once elected, they have to almost immediately start fundraising, and obviously in the run up as well. And if your program, these, election reforms would make it more difficult for a candidate to be elected, wouldn't it create a larger fiduciary responsibility? If so, could it create a void of local candidates and instead allow those with ties to lobbyists, financial interests to hold? And if not, how are candidates who don't have the backing of major PACs or political parties able to enter the conversation against a larger field of candidates? So I think it just goes back to like, what do you guys mean by it's going to be harder to stay in office under an open primary system, and where do you see that kind of trickling out and the effects of that?
It's a great question, and maybe we should look at the. Thanks for the call out on the wording, because maybe that we should. I'm going to take fresh eyes and think about that. What I think it does. First of all, we have data from Alaska, and what it allows incumbent politicians to do is to not have to cater to the most extreme partisan interest, but to vote in for what they think represents their state. And in Alaska, we have Senator Sullivan and Senator Murkowski, and then both Republican, and then Mary Peltola, who's a statewide elected House member, Democrat. And they all three of them frustrate their parties with some of their votes because they're choosing to do what's in the interest of Alaska. And so I think we need more states to be able to answer your great question quantitatively. Because quantitatively, what I think it will reveal is if you actually focus on being a workhorse and work hard for your state, and the majority of reasonable people in your state think that you have done that, you're going to sail through re-election, and you won't have to spend 40% of your time on call time. Most politicians spend so much time just calling and asking for money. And the biggest threat and the most expensive threat that any politician can face is being primaried. And so here's the interesting thing. And there is some data around ranked choice voting reducing money in politics as a byproduct, because there's more choices, and because the most expensive races to run are two-person races, and it doesn't matter if it's a Republican versus Democrat or a Republican versus Republican. It's a two-person race that looks to be close, and the money floods in, and so do the political consultants who get paid on this stuff. And the nature of the campaign ad spend is negative. Those are very expensive races. If you're in a 5-person race and you're one of 5, it's not strategic to go negative. So what you need to do is spend money talking about why you're a good alternative. And if Victoria is your first choice, I want to be your second choice. So it's not smart for me to tear down Victoria. It's smart for me to say, hey, she and I agree on education policy, but Matthew and I, we agree on defense spending. And Bond and I agree on the national debt's out of control. So I'm making bridges and appeals. There's just less money that goes into that kind of a campaign than goes into a 2-person race, particularly an intra-party fight. And I think it frees up elected officials to focus on policymaking. Another thing will also happen, though. You'll have competition in every election. Most U.S. senators and particularly House members, 87% of people in Congress represent safe seats, meaning the seat is either Republican or Democrat, and that's not going to change. So you're not really facing a contested re-election. So what you do as a politician is you just stack up money, you store money, you call time, you get a bunch of money, you look intimidating, and then you don't take any votes that are going to violate your party orthodoxy, so that you don't get primaried. That's the game. So in a Final 4, Final 5 model, you're going to have competition every cycle. So that's where it's harder, because you're not going to be able to just coast. So if you're a politician, that's maybe the bad news. The good news is if you continue to represent the majority of your interests, they'll probably keep sending you back. But maybe not if you're over the age of 80. They might think it's time for someone new. So like if you're an 80-year-old who's been in uncontested races for the last 6 cycles, you stand to lose. Yes. But if you like representing the majority of your constituents, and you're not afraid of competition, and you think that you can have a life beyond politics, beyond being a career politician, then you're fine. Don't worry about it. Just represent your constituents, and they'll keep sending you back.
Yep, well said. And I think that's to tie it to our work too, that's part of what we're trying to do is, 70% of races go uncontested, even, incorporating the local level, let alone, the federal level, the even bigger number you named. So, contesting those races, if it's going to be a safe Democrat or Republican district, you can contest with an independent, right? And compete in the general election today. The reforms that, Todd's working toward would just make that way easier, quite frankly, and start to change some of the forces and just, ease the path. But that's part of the work we're doing at Good Party now is how can we start today with the system that we have in most places and still make these changes and get people elected. And I think that goes along. I want to ask a question from Cesari, just around, what if I like your mission in general, but I think RCV is, not is inadequate compared to something like approval voting, and we can name some other ones. There's other systems of voting. So just curious your guys' take on that with your organization for the people who are into the different kinds of reform world, because there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on too, for sure.
Totally. Yeah, and I really respect anyone that wants to advance reforms. And here's, my philosophy. Eric, my co-founder, he's probably got a slightly different philosophy. I try to just be really practical around this stuff. If there's an effort for approval voting that's on the ballot and looks like it's got a chance of being implemented, I'm for it. And we've been for it in places where there's opportunities, where there are state campaigns around ranked choice voting or open primaries. If it looks like it's incremental towards something that could be final five voting, I'm for it. So I really, what I think is unconstructive, and this isn't the question you're asking, but you see some of this a little bit, is the worst thing we could do is sort of the small nascent reform communities kind of fight amongst ourselves around reforms. I think there should be space for like intellectual debate and research about which of these reforms works, and I'm always open to that. And I'm on the board of National Association of the Nonpartisan Reformers, NANNER, and there's folks that are prefer the Condorcet method and star voting and approval voting, and there's other methodologies at play. I'm interested in innovation. I'd love to see the United States be a laboratory of democracy, where some states have approval voting and go live with it, and other states are operating solely with a Final Five model, and we get to look and say longitudinally, how did that affect campaign spending? How did that affect negative campaigning? How did it elevate third party, minor party, independent candidates? What happened from a governance standpoint? What happened from a legislative standpoint? So I think more is better. But we've really anchored ourselves on Final Five voting, because I think that's where most of the action is going to be, and where there's going to be state campaigns. I think there's going to be just more of that stuff happening. But where there are campaigns underway, we'll support those as well. Part of our organizational strategy is we're not going to like really be the organization that starts and launches campaigns, but we are going to be an outsized supporting actor where those campaigns go live. So there's a campaign right now underway in Idaho. We quickly, launched a chapter of Veterans for Idaho Voters, getting a lot of folks there, mostly Republicans, organized, collected signatures. But we won't be in most of these states the campaign lead. There will be a existing organization that's already advancing some of the stuff. So where approval voting or other things are on the ballot, making progress, I'm all for it. But I don't really want me back to the values. I'm not going to spend time supporting a model, and this isn't so much approval, but I want to focus on where things are going to happen legislatively or through a ballot initiative process, and where there's reforms that I think get us better, I'll be for it. We'll be for it.
Yeah, I think that approach is so powerful, just to activate the community that you're a part of and close to, and just, helping push things forward where they're happening. I love the laboratory of democracy. I mean, that's what this country, can be and should be, and, needs to be more of. So that's really great. And I think, just another question from Kolya, and then I think a similar question from Daytake, who we had one from earlier. It's just around the different stats and stuff that you guys point to. And, I think Kolya was just curious about the stat you have on your website on 69% of veterans are still trusted in their communities. Just wanted to hear more about what that really means. And then, how do you, what do you kind of rely on? What's kind of Daytake's question, around what stats you think are meaningful and helpful to support, the messaging that you guys are putting out there about why these reforms are needed and why veterans are a really key group to unlock them.
Yeah. There's we pulled together data, and the data is not perfect, and there's actually a lot more data I would like, but we pulled together data from places like the Edelman Trust Barometer. There's some stats out of the VA. Rand Corporation has a lot of great sort of data and stats. Stuff specific to, and actually Pew has some great data and stats. Stuff related to voter behavior and patterns. There's a lot of political and consulting firms and polling firms that have specifically pulled some of that stuff. So we're always trying to like help frame the right relevant story. But we also don't have perfect data. This is actually an area that we're sort of interested in with AI. Can we get to better approximations of veteran populations within states, their partisan affiliation identities? That's sort of a gap for us, but yeah, try to pull from credible sources and cite those sources on all of our materials. And if you go to our overview, veteransforallvoters.org/overview, we've got more stats there, and we include citation of any stats that we have. So if you want to kind of go deeper on that, feel free to go there. Also, feel free to send me an email, todd@veteransforallvoters.org. I'm happy to share with you what you have. And we are trying to become kind of a little bit of a repository for this kind of information, because we do grab and capture a bunch of articles, and we have, in our shop, just tons of articles and research and sources that we can also share as well, if you really
Yeah.
want to.
Yeah. And then I just quickly would love to hear about for folks who are not a veteran, kind of what it means of veterans are still trusted in our communities. And I think my understanding is it's still trusted compared to politicians, especially, right? Like that's kind of where that's coming from. But if you want to quickly speak to that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's and I don't have the exact like framing question of like how
It
it's
was like
trusted.
69% of veterans are still trusted in our communities. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And there's threats to that. I mean, we have some veterans that are really bad actors, or who are co-opted into malintent overrepresentation on January 6th. So there's some noise in this, but generally speaking, Americans like think veterans who have like served, like kind of want to do the right thing, and generally can be trusted when they stand up and express themselves, particularly if they don't come with a political affinity or a political agenda. Same is true of small business owners as well. I mean, that's another constituency that's really important. We work closely with Mormon Women for Ethical Government, and they are also advocating for this issue set. And they have a lot of trust as well, particularly with some of their faith community, but other constituencies as well. So it is important that we figure out, how do we break through the noise, reach people in honest ways, explain what's going on, help narrate the moment that we're in. And I don't know that veterans are perfect messengers, but I think they can be effective messengers. Yeah.
Yep, that makes sense. And, I actually had a question kind of building off of that too. And in speaking with veterans and, working on these issues, what do you hear from folks of what they really want out of their representatives and the people who would like to elect when they can't even do it today, right? In some places, who they want to see serving them in public office, and what's kind of a vision of what public service, in government could look like from the veteran perspective that we maybe aren't really seeing today.
Yeah, I mean, look, service is running for office, putting yourself out there, willing to get things moving, and I think there's a lot. It's like moving beyond the online forums and stepping out as a human in real ways and trying to get real things done. I mean, I think that's just an ethos that we need more people to embody right now, not just waiting to sort of be told what the answer is, or just shooting down from the sidelines what the answer is. Like, I think if you have a point of view, I presume this is why everyone's on this call. Step out, put your face in front of it. Take the hits, but have a point of view and aim to get things done. And I think that is what people do when they serve the military or other forms of service too. I mean, public, whatever, volunteering. But I think we need people. There's gonna be so much noise and money flowing, and it's going to look intimidating, but I think it's going to require just everyday citizens stepping up and just from your place saying this is not okay, there's a better way, and trying to be something different, and part of I think being different is stylistically not just kind of screaming about what's going on, but saying actually I have solutions, I have ideas. And I think that stylistic contrast in and of itself will catch people's attention because they're so used to the political debate being framed in such a snarky and cynical way that when you actually treat people as smart, like, hey, I think you can actually be thoughtful about this, um, people are like surprised. Like it's like, wow, you're actually interested in what I might think and how we, make politics better. And you're not doing it with an agenda against me. You're doing it in a way that feels different, and inclusive, and assumes I'm smart and assumes I can think differently. So I think that is what patriotism in this moment, frankly, is. I think it's the people on this call who are thinking about how do you preserve this experiment in self-government for future generations. And I think that's to be commended. I think that's what I really do. I think it's what patriotism looks like. It's easy to kind of go hard against the opposition. That's easy. That's lazy in my mind. Like the higher standard is moving your friends to a new place. Like hating on your enemies is easy. That's sort of, framing community as a common hatred is like it's not actually a community. I think the real heroes of the moment are going to be the people that take their loved ones, their friends and neighbors, the people that they think have been in agreement with them, and say, I think we've been thinking about this wrong. We have more work to do. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's a question I put back to everyone, but that's at least what I think we're trying to do in this moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, I think final question here, that I'm seeing is, what are initiatives and projects are you and the team and the, wider volunteer movement at Veterans for All Voters most excited about as we come into 2024? Like what's on the horizon that you're getting excited about and working on?
Yeah, I mean, there's several campaigns underway. I mean, I'm excited by the campaign in Idaho. I'm excited by the campaign in Nevada. There's a legislative effort in Wisconsin. There's a effort in Pennsylvania to open primaries. There's some efforts underway to, because every state is different and needs sort of different there's a political strategy underway in every state, which is why I try not to remain, I don't want to say purist, but like we don't say like it's either all our way or nothing. It's like, let's see where there can be progress. Some states are trying to ensure primaries are publicly funded, and I totally support that. And I think that creates a unique opportunity for putting the parties in a place of responsibility. They want all the privileges, but none of the responsibilities of running their own elections. But yeah, I mean, several states that have specific efforts. DC has an effort underway for Final Five voting. Strong opposition from the Democratic Party there. Disappointing but predictable.
And I'll
And
note that one in DC is led by someone who identifies as independent and is really pushing that hard in DC in the belly of all the partisanship. So yeah, that's a good one to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I think people are tuning in the fact that this is what I tell people, the fact that I'd love Americans to have a consciousness of just the simple fact that they can change the way their elections are done. And my view is if Americans can kind of, at least voting Americans can come to understand that the filibuster is a thing, it's highly technical. Like we got American consciousness into Senate rules because they felt like we're being hijacked. Well, I'm therefore confident that Americans can come to have an informed view of approval voting and ranked choice voting and other things and Final Five voting and open primaries, and like the idea that registered independents can't vote, or the fact that primaries are publicly funded but privately executed, or so this is radical. I actually think the American people are not stupid, and I think talking to them like they're not stupid might actually be profoundly innovative in this moment. And so I'm optimistic, and I also think, because I think if you just study enough and read enough and think enough, and I think the business community is sort of an interesting audience in this, because I think their view has been, we can sort of afford to sit this out. I think it's going to get to a point where you cannot afford to sit this out, and sitting it out is not going, or being involved is not just going to be giving money to the candidates that you've historically given money to and that you support. It's going to become like, actually, what's the investment we can make so that we don't ever have to make this investment again, like the way that we've been forced to make it. And I think if you just take that path intellectually, I think it leads you in the near term to election reform and long term to other things. And so I think there will be a great awakening amongst a vast number of Americans and institutions, including business, that have not sort of engaged to the extent that they can and probably need to, but maybe will be forced to. And for all the things that are scary about this moment, maybe it invites that level of participation.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a, when your back's against the wall, and I'm sure as a veteran you've encountered those moments, right? Like, what do you do? Do you, back down and just let things happen to you, or do you stand up and do something about it and take action? And I think that's, the moment that we're hopefully seeing and feeling in more and more places and more people, and providing a lane for people to do that isn't politics as usual and partisanship and infighting and all the gross, yucky parts of it that most people are just so over, So, and actually, we just got one more question. I don't know if you have time for one more from David, or whether you have to run, but let me know if you got time for one more here.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. David says, it's true that trust is lacking broadly, and as some veterans cannot run for office with all the apparent stated benefits of incorporating veterans into the political process. It seems like most political campaigns could benefit from incorporating a veteran perspective. How should a campaign hope to gain this perspective? How can this be done without being seen as appropriation to some degree of like vet washing, or, how can they do it authentically so it's not like oh yeah, here's our token veteran, type of thing?
Totally. Great question. Because there's a shadow side to all this. And so I don't think it should be four-star generals standing up at political conventions and saying this candidate's pro-military and that one's anti-military. That is like un-American. It's unconstructive. I don't think that's constructive. So I'm not for that. I think the way to authentically do it is to recruit veterans and give them meaningful responsibilities, and have them not just sort of stand up and signpost that their status as a veteran. I think it's to actually meaningfully engage them and have them reach out and listen. There are some great programs. Syracuse University, IVMF, runs a veterans in politics program, and they do candidate training and also kind of campaign management training. So it's a great pipeline that exists there. New Politics is a pipeline. There are others, but yeah, it's a great question. I mean, candidates should engage veterans because they're talented, and I think they can bring a lot to bear. And then I think we have to be responsible with how we leverage the brand. And I recognize that we are leveraging the brand. Veterans is in our name, so we have to be really responsible on how that is done, and challenge people to do that ethically, and really be careful about how we don't politicize and particularly partisanize any military affiliation. And we've seen both parties commit fouls on that front, and it's bad. It's bad for the military. It hurts national security. It hurts recruitment. And so we have to really be avoiding that. But that can't be conflated. And I think this is kind of what I hear in your question, David. That's really dangerous. But we should not say, therefore, we can't have veterans participating in our political process. We absolutely need veterans participating in our political process. We need them now more than ever. We need them participating at a grassroots level in campaigns as advocates, and we need their voices. But we just have to think about, and make sure that we do that responsibly. That's my view.
Yeah, no, that's really, really important. And, it's I think just even like just to celebrate something, I think is just so kind of fortuitous and fun, and hopefully do it in an authentic way, not in a, not a weird spotlighting way, but we're lucky at Good Party. Just, we're doing this with you today, and our first veteran, has joined the team, working on our full-time team. So it's, excited Matthew's here. And I was like, oh, what a fun little coincidence. That's actually happening on this day that we're talking to you. So
sorry, I had a brisket I had to take off.
No, you're good.
Moment, so.
Take care of that brisket.
That's important.
Yep. So I know he was like, wait, what? On my first day, you're doing this thing with Todd Connors from Veterans for All Voters. Like, this is so cool. So there's just so much synergy that's possible across this broader democracy reform movement, I think is, what's really inspiring about the work. And just knowing, I think from the broad coalition of people who are interested in, reform that will benefit independents, nonpartisans, all these alternative parties, people seeking all these reforms. Like that's who Good Party is, representing and trying to create that leg up so that anyone can run for office outside of these, big money, special interests, two-party forces, and just serve their community, which veterans do so well and know so deeply. So really, really happy, that you were able to join us, Todd. Where can people learn more about your organization, kind of final things you want them to go check out and do?
Yeah, please join us. Honestly, if you're a veteran, you're military affiliate, connected in any way, military spouse, military family member, please, please, please join us, veteransforallvoters.org/volunteer. And then my email's todd@veteransforallvoters.org. Feel free to drop me a line or find me on LinkedIn or I was going to say any social outlet, but probably not. Find me on LinkedIn. We like to keep the conversations classy and professional, and we avoid platforms that don't cultivate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're glad that we can bring your amazingness to some other platforms too, so people can learn about your organization and join you guys, because it's happening all over the country. You said 48 states. Like there's a veteran working on this in your state, with Todd's organization. So he can link you up and get you involved. So awesome, Todd. Well, thank you again so much from us at Good Party. So grateful for your work. Thank you for being here and answering these questions. And, everyone who's tuned in and participating tonight and send your questions in, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. We're doing these AMAs on the regular. So if you want to hear about the next one, then you can just make sure to drop your email at goodparty.org. It's right there on the homepage. You'll get our newsletter where we announce upcoming AMAs. And we've got a whole bunch of awesome organizations coming through. We were just, some people at our organization was just with Todd at the Nonpartisan, Reformers Conference, and so many awesome people who are going to be coming through the AMA to kind of weave through all the work that we do and show how we can be so much stronger as a movement together. So thank you very much, Todd.
Thank you, Victoria. And thank you everyone that joined. And thank you, Good Party, for stepping in and being a source of kind of political innovation. And we need more of it. So thank you for what you're doing, and great to be with you guys tonight.
Awesome. Thank you.